to first think about this. A couple of years ago, around 2000, at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, there was this story that went viral featuring a man named Captain Tom. Does anybody remember the story of Captain Tom? Captain Tom is a British Army veteran. He served in Burma and India during the Second World War. And after he retired from the Army, he went into instructing on Army warfare, and he also was a manager of a concrete plant and a motorcycle enthusiast. You might not tell it from that picture, but he could ride a bike, and he loved it. In 2000, of course, around the time of April, the pandemic was really unknown at that point, and people were wondering what was going to happen. And Captain Tom took it upon himself at the age of 99 to raise money for healthcare workers in the UK. And how did he do it? He walked his backyard, and he said, before I turn 100 years old, I'm going to walk 100 laps in my backyard, which you might be thinking sounds pretty easy, but hey, get to 99 years old and you tell me if that's not easy or not. But he made it, and he was determined in early April, I'm going to walk 100 laps and raise money. His goal was to raise £1,000 and give it to the healthcare workers that were working overtime at that time, and there was a lot of unknown about their safety. What happened next? Well, the world took notice, and he got to £1,000 within about a day. And within a couple more weeks, on his 100th birthday, he made his final laps, and the world had noticed and had raised 38 million pounds for the healthcare workers in the UK. It was an incredible story at the time. I almost had forgotten about it until I came across it during my sermon study again, and I thought to myself, wow, what a gift. But how simple of a gift, right? Think about the impact that he had on the world. In fact, just taking some steps because he was motivated and moved to help people that were in need, it had a huge impact, but it was giving the best that he had. And in fact, he became Sir Captain Tom after that because he was knighted by the Queen, and he was known around the world. He didn't live another year. In fact, he's passed on from now. But I thought I'd share his story this morning, not just as an inspiration for you and me, but to think about this. If someone like Sir Captain Tom could be moved to do something with what he had, an aging body, a walker, and determination, to do something so simple and so great, to give the best that he had in the way that he could, and it had such a blessing, how much more do Christians, followers of Jesus, how much more are we moved? Because it's not just that bodies are at stake, or that there's a coronavirus, or there's a pandemic, which is terrible enough, but there are souls at stake. And so often, I don't know about you, but so often it's hard for me to think about other people as generously as somebody like Captain Tom thought about other people. Why is it that we grow so lethargic with our giving, or our gifts, or our talents? Or why do we think that we have to give something really great for God to love us, or we need to do something really grand to make the gospel spread across the world? The point is this: God unveiled his gift to you and me at Christmas, and he wants that same gift to be unveiled to the whole world. So where can I be moved, and how can I be moved to give as generously and as joyfully and to give my life and to bring gifts to God that are pleasing to him? Where do we find that motivation? Where do we find that joy? Not just the joy in walking laps, but to give my whole self to the one who gave himself to me. The story of the Magi, or the wise men that came from the east, is a story about the gift being unveiled to the whole world, and it's also a story about how people at that time and day gave what they had in order to worship God with everything that they had in their heart. And I want you to listen now to this account one more time. We read it just a few moments ago in worship. And as you do, think about the generous outpouring of God's gift to these magi and these magi's response to that gift that was given to them. It says in Matthew chapter 2, starting at verse 1, "After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, 'Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him.' When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. 'In Bethlehem in Judea,' they replied, 'for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people.' Then Herod called the magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, 'Go, search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him.' After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route." The question is, how does this account unveil God's generosity that transforms us? And the first thing we have to realize is that there are barriers that keep us from giving our best. There are barriers that keep us from giving our best. This story of these people, these strangers, the magi or the wise men, they were cultural outsiders, you might say. They weren't the people of God. They came from a country far away, far east of Israel, in perhaps what is modern-day Iraq or Iran. The people of their day and their age, they didn't exactly get along with the people of Israel. They had formerly been their captors, like back in the days of the Babylonian captivity. And now these people, they probably looked strange, dressed differently. At church, they might have been the person that walks in the doors and you give them the side eye, sort of like, "Hey, what's going on? You don't dress like a normal, 21st century American." They come walking through the doors and they might sit in the front row of church, like right here, not knowing that nobody sits in the front row of church ever at a Lutheran church or this church. That's the blank row. But we'd love them. But they would be kind of strange and different. The barriers that keep us from reaching out with love and generosity to some people might be cultural. Or we might think to ourselves that they are outsiders or they've done things that a normal church person might not do. Or maybe they've made mistakes in the past and it's kind of known in the community, and so they have a stigma. The barriers that keep us from reaching out generously with our whole life to some people, they could be prejudice within our heart. They could be. Because that's how we're all born into this world, to look out for number one. Or maybe you're thinking to yourself, I am that person. God could never love me for what I've done. Or maybe God could never accept me into his family. If people really knew the things that I did, then how would he ever invite me into his family? How would a church or how would a Christian community ever receive me? Barriers keep us from giving our best, and barriers keep us from God. The barriers of prejudice, the barriers of self-loathing and saying, I don't trust that God's grace is big enough for me personally. Or maybe you find yourself in Herod's shoes, that you want to protect your little kingdom at all costs, never bending the knee to King Jesus. King Herod, he was a bad man. And he was known, actually, for being extremely greedy and extremely nervous about his power and giving up his power. One historian writes that at the time of his death, he did something pretty nasty. He knew that everybody in his town, Jerusalem, they would rejoice when he died, and so he gathered together all of the loved leaders of the town, and when he died, he gave the order that they should be killed too, so that the whole city would mourn. That's how scared he was of losing power. And you might think that's a really terrible thing, but maybe you and I are looking at God, and we're thinking to ourselves, I'm only in this relationship with God in order to have God do stuff for me, or God to give me things in my little kingdom that I don't have. And so I'm going to be obedient. I'm going to go to church. I'm going to give. I'm going to be generous with my time. But as soon as I need something, I'm going to make sure God is there, and I'm going to make sure God does it for me. And if he doesn't, have you had the attitude of Herod before? Barriers that keep us from him and from giving generously? The good news is that although you and I create barriers, and we have barriers that keep us from God and keep us from giving generously to God, God has a completely other attitude towards you and me. God welcomes insiders and outsiders. You notice that God meets the Magi in their culture. Magi were doing things perhaps that the Hebrew scriptures said were wrong. They were astrologers. They were people who studied the stars. They had superstitious beliefs. They perhaps had a lot of paganism that was mixed in with this weird obsession with science and with knowledge. And it wasn't knowledge in the scripture. And yeah, sure, some scholars say they had the Hebrew scriptures that were handed down to them years before from people like Daniel and Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego who were in captivity back then. And that could be true, but you know what? God gave them a star. He gave them something that was right in their culture, in their today and in their age that led them, strangely enough, this supernatural phenomenon that led them right to the place where they would worship their king. I don't like telling this story because I'm not telling you to do something that's wrong, but it's been an experience of one of my former coworkers that he was ministering to somebody who had seen a tarot card reader and told her pastor that she had seen the tarot card reader. And I'm not going and telling you to see a tarot card reader, but do you know what? She came away from one of the readings. The tarot card reader says, yeah, that church down the street, I'm being told that you should go to that church. Now, again, don't go to a tarot card reader for advice, but can you believe that God can use anything in any situation to bring somebody into a relationship with him? Don't go looking into the dark arts for that. I'm just telling you, if God can take a star and he can lead somebody to himself in a relationship, into the truth in God's word, into a place where somebody can learn something about grace, God can do it, and he can reach out to outsiders however he wants to. And he'll do it in his way, and he'll do it in his time. And when it leads to the truth of the gospel, God was doing it with a star, with a strange astrology. God maybe reaches out to outsiders more than you and I could even imagine doing. And if you're sitting in church today and you're thinking to yourself, I have been prejudiced to outsiders, to the world. Or you're thinking to yourself, I'm self-loathing and grace doesn't reach me and I'm just sitting here as a hypocrite. Guess what? His grace reaches insiders too. You're forgiven. And for all the kingdoms that we build and all the demands that we make on God, like Herod, bend your knee in repentance with me. You're forgiven. The king that the Magi came to worship grew up and wore a crown of thorns for you. He took on all of the prejudice. He took on all the self-loathing. He took on all the I want my own kingdom. And he died on a cross to bring you to God and to take down all the barriers by grace. That means undeserved love. An undeserved love for outsiders and an undeserved love for insiders. So, what's your part in the story as we close? Bring your best, because Jesus has given you his. Bring what you have. If it's an aging body and a walker and determination, bring it. All, because he brought it all and gives you all. You know, gold and frankincense and myrrh, those are kind of strange gifts for a baby at a baby shower, would you think? And some scholars and commentators, they get all technical and they say that the gold is for royalty and the frankincense points to worship and the myrrh was an embalming spice that would be used for Jesus' resurrection or his burial. And maybe that's true. Maybe the wise men were really that wise to know exactly which gifts to give this king. Or maybe they just brought what they had from the east. Maybe these were the gifts that they said, these are the best that I can bring. This is just what I have. This is what I bring a king. But they brought what they had, and they brought their best. Do you get the point? Bring what you have, and bring your best. You're coming to a king who has given you more. He's given you everything you have anyways. He's given you your body and your mind and your time. He's given you all of this, and now you come to him with the wise men, and you say, just take what I have, Jesus, and take it for your kingdom, because souls are at stake, because lives are at stake. So do you know somebody from church or not from church that aren't in a relationship with God, or maybe they're falling away from a relationship with God? Use your influence with them and say, you need to be around the Word. You need to be around the means of grace, the Christian community. Come back. You can do that. Just use what you have. You get it? You might say, I don't have a lot that I can do with my body because maybe I don't have those gifts, but I have other gifts, maybe monetary gifts, and you say, you know what, God, I can't do other things what other people do, but I'm going to give. And maybe it doesn't have to be 38 million pounds. It can be the gift that you have, because that's what you have, and bring it like the wise men brought their gift. Bring it from the heart. And it won't hurt. I promise. Well, it may hurt, but it's going to be a joyful hurt, because that's what worship is. A joyful hurt that is in response to the joyful hurt that Jesus did when he gave his life for you. He did it because he loves you so much. He loves you with his whole life. The Christian missionary and author Elizabeth Elliot, she tells this story. There once was a king who decided to come out of his palace one day and walk around the village and to visit the common people. And as he was walking around, getting to know his subjects a little bit better, there was a beggar with an alms bowl, right? The bowl that received the gifts or whatever that people would give him as they walked by. And the beggar saw the king coming, and so he ran up to the king and he held out the bowl. He thought that he would have this handsome gift that was given to him. And the king said, "Give me something. I want you to give me something." And the beggar, he's a little strange, he thought, give the king something. Maybe he was even a little bit angry. He went through his alms bowl and he pulled out 3 grains of rice and gave it to the king. That night, after the beggar went home, he emptied his alms bowl and he found 3 gold pieces at the bottom of the bowl. And he looked up and he said, "If only I had given him everything." Give God everything with your whole heart. You know that he's going to bless you, and he's going to bless those that come through with the gifts that you give to him. Everything that you give from the heart, he refines it, and he gets it, and it's pure, and it's good, and it's a blessing. Maybe not I'm not saying that you're going to become rich by giving. I'm saying that when you give the gift to God, you're giving it to a king that says, I'm sanctifying this. I'm making your gift, no matter what it is you've given from the heart, I'm going to make it pure gold. He's taken down your barriers. He's given you his life. Come and worship the King who gave his life to you, because that's what Christmas, even for the Gentiles, is all about. It's forgiving.